Kanisa triangle illusion. How your brain creates shapes? Take a look at this image. Do you see a white triangle? It might seem like it's there, but surprisingly, there's no actual triangle drawn. This is the Kanisa triangle illusion, and it shows how our brains fill in missing information to create shapes that aren't actually there. The illusion works because of the placement of black shapes and the way our brains interpret them. The brain connects the gaps between the black shapes and automatically forms the perception of a white triangle. This happens because our brain uses its Gestalt principles, where it fills in incomplete information to make sense of visual stimuli. The brain is wired to look for patterns and create complete shapes, even when parts of them are missing. This effect is so powerful that it can deceive us, even when we know the triangle isn't really there. It's a reminder of how our minds constantly try to make sense of the world by filling in the blanks with what we expect to see. The spinning dancer illusion. Left brain versus right brain? So, check this out. You're looking at a dancer spinning, right? But here's the cool part. Some of you might see her spinning clockwise, and some might see her spinning counterclockwise. Pretty wild, right? This happens because the image is just a flat 2D silhouette. No depth, no clear clues about which leg is in front. Your brain has to guess, so it flips back and forth between two possible directions, clockwise or counterclockwise. Now, it's not about which side of your brain is in charge. It's all about how your brain handles depth and movement. When your brain looks at this, it's trying to make sense of the visual information. The brain processes this in the visual cortex. And here's the kicker. If you focus on details, like the dancer's foot, you might be able to change the direction you see her spinning. This illusion is all about how your brain interprets limited information and makes its best guess about depth and movement. The Miller-Lyer illusion. When identical lines look different, take a look at these two lines. One of them seems longer than the other, right? Well, here's the twist. They're actually the same length. This is the Miller-Lyer illusion, and it's been a puzzling mystery for over a century. So, why does this illusion work? It all comes down to how our brain interprets depth. The arrows at both ends create a sense of perspective. The line with the outward-facing arrows looks like it belongs to a distant wall, making our brain think it's longer. On the other hand, the line with inward-facing arrows looks like a corner jutting out toward us, making it appear shorter. This happens because our brain relies on visual cues from perspective to assess depth and size. Even though the two lines are identical in length, our brain processes them as being different sizes due to these depth cues. The Ames room illusion. How your brain misjudges size? Imagine walking into a room where one person looks giant and another looks tiny, even though they're just a few feet apart. Sounds pretty wild, right? That's the Ames room illusion at work. At first, the room might seem totally normal, but it's not what it appears. The walls and floor are cleverly slanted, creating a forced perspective. This tricks your brain into thinking the room is rectangular. It's like the space itself is playing a little game with you. Your brain gets confused and assumes that people should be the same size, even though they're clearly not. Why does this happen? Well, your brain is hardwired to think rooms are rectangular and that the distance between things stays the same. So, when it's faced with something like the Ames room, your brain ignores certain depth cues, making people appear drastically different in size. It's a clever trick, and though it happens automatically, it's a reminder of how our brain's shortcuts can sometimes lead us astray. So, next time you see someone shrinking or growing in a weird room, you'll know exactly what's going on. The Shepherd's Tables illusion. Why identical tables look different? Take a look at these two tables. One seems long and narrow, while the other appears short and wide. But here's the surprising part. They're exactly the same size and shape. This is the Shepherd's Tables illusion, a fantastic example of how perspective shapes our perception. The illusion works because of the angles and depth cues in the drawing. Our brains interpret the edges and legs of the tables as part of a three-dimensional space, making us perceive one table as stretched and the other as compressed. Even when we measure them, our brains continue to see them as being different. This effect is so powerful that it even influences how we perceive real-world objects. Furniture designers and architects often use similar tricks to manipulate how we perceive space in a room. It's a reminder that our brains don't always give us the whole picture. What we see is not always what's actually real. Checker shadow illusion. How your brain misjudges color? Look at these two squares. One looks darker than the other, right? But what if I told you they're actually the same color? This is the checker shadow illusion, and it works because of how our brain interprets light and shadow. When a shadow falls on an object, our brain assumes the area under it is darker than it really is. To compensate, it lightens the shadowed area in our perception, helping us understand depth and light in the real world. But here's the trick. This automatic adjustment sometimes misleads us. Square B, which is inside the shadow, appears lighter than square A, even though they are identical in color. Our brain relies on context. Shadows make things seem darker, and bright areas seem lighter. This illusion is a powerful reminder that our visual system isn't perfect. It's just doing its best to make sense of the world. The cafe wall illusion. When straight lines look crooked, what if I told you that these lines are actually perfectly straight? It might sound impossible, right? But that's exactly what's happening in the cafe wall illusion. At first glance, the horizontal lines in this pattern appear to be slanted, but in reality, they are all straight and parallel. This illusion occurs because of how your brain processes contrast and edges. The alternating black and white tiles interfere with your brain's perception, making it misinterpret the relationship between the lines. This is called edge enhancement, where your brain overemphasizes the differences between light and dark, causing the straight lines to look tilted. This illusion is so powerful that it can even occur in real life. You may see it in buildings, tiled walls, or even road markings. Next time you think a wall looks crooked, take a closer look. You might just be seeing an illusion. The Ponzo illusion. Why distance makes things look bigger? Take a look at these two yellow lines. One seems much longer than the other, but here's the trick. They're actually the same size. This is the Ponzo illusion, and it shows how our brain processes depth and distance. The lines in the background appear to converge, much like train tracks disappearing into the distance. Our brain assumes that objects higher up in the image are farther away. To compensate for this perceived distance, our brain stretches the top line, making it appear larger. This happens because our brain uses visual cues from the surroundings, like perspective, to judge the size of objects. This illusion is a perfect example of how perspective influences our perception of the world. For instance, think about how the moon looks huge when it's near the horizon, but much smaller when it's high up in the sky. The Zollner illusion. When parallel lines look tilted, look at these lines for a second. Do they seem slanted to you? Here's the catch. They're actually perfectly parallel. This is the Zollner illusion, and it occurs because of how our brains interpret angles and depth. The trick here is the short diagonal lines that cross the main parallel lines. These little diagonal lines mess with your brain, creating a false sense of perspective. Your brain then assumes the main lines are tilted. Our brains are always trying to make sense of the world by using the visual cues around us, like angles and distances. In this case, those diagonal lines confuse your brain, and it ends up seeing the parallel lines as slanted. Even if you measure them with a ruler, they'll still look tilted. This effect shows how our brains often see what they expect to see, rather than what's actually there. It's a perfect example of how perception can be deceiving in the most unexpected ways. The Ebbinghaus illusion. How surroundings change our perception of size. Look at these two orange circles. One appears much larger than the other, doesn't it? But here's the surprising part. They're actually the same size. This is the Ebbinghaus illusion, and it shows how our brain's perception of size is heavily influenced by surrounding objects. Our brains are always using context to judge size. When a circle is surrounded by smaller objects, it appears larger because our brain compares it to the surrounding objects. On the other hand, when the circle is surrounded by larger objects, it appears smaller. This is all because of a phenomenon in the visual system known as contextual size perception. The surrounding objects act as a reference point, and your brain automatically processes this information. This illusion is a perfect example of how our brain interprets the world around us. It explains why a car might look tiny when it's surrounded by huge trucks, but appear enormous when placed next to a small bicycle. Our perception of size doesn't just rely on the object itself. It's deeply influenced by the context in which it exists.